Love what you hear? Be sure to check us out on Patreon at patreon.com/finishthefight for exclusive episodes, insights, and even our D&D adventure. Welcome back to Finish the Fight, a gaming podcast.
Where we produce and develop the highest quality gaming research in podcast form.
I'm your host, Alex Kendall.
And I am your host, Derek Baker.
And today, we're going to be talking about one of the games that started the latest craze in terms of our D&D content, and that is the first Baldur's Gate.
Yeah, Baldur's Gate has been in the news a lot recently because of Baldur's Gate 3, which by and large has set a new standard, at least in a player's point of view, on what role-playing games should really offer the community.
I think it's absolutely true. And we see, and it's really cool. I do want to talk about Baldur's Gate 3 at some point, especially when we dig a little deeper and get some more information, because there has been some hot goss going around, especially with Larian Studios leaving to kind of develop their own games after this, after developing the third one. But we're going to bring it back and talk a bit more about BioWare today and how they took the idea of pen and paper gaming into tabletop. So Baldur's Gate is a role-playing video game that was developed by BioWare and published in 1998 by Interplay Entertainment. It is the first game in the Baldur's Gate series and takes place in the Forgotten Realms, a high fantasy campaign setting using a modified version of the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, or AD&D, 2nd edition rules. It was the first game to use the Infinity Engine for its graphics, with Interplay using the engine for other Forgotten Realms licensed games, including the Icewind Dale series and Planescape Torment. The game's story focuses on a player-made character who travels across the Sword Coast alongside a party of companions. The game received critical acclaim and was credited with revitalizing computer role-playing games. An expansion pack was released titled Tales of the Sword Coast, as was a sequel, Baldur's Gate 2, Shadows of Amn. An enhanced version of the Infinity Engine was later created as part of Beamdog's remake, Baldur's Gate Enhanced Edition, the first new release in the franchise in nearly 9 years. The original Baldur's Gate continues to be referenced as a point of inspiration in many modern role-playing games, and is often cited as one of the best video games ever made. And in 2023, Larian Studios released the third installment, Baldur's Gate 3.
So let's go ahead and drop back and talk about BioWare, who we have talked about before, have made a ton of great video games, especially role-playing games. You might know them from Mass Effect or Dragon Age. Of course, we did an episode on Knights of the Old Republic as well, so any of those have some information, but let's talk a little bit more about them today. BioWare was founded by Ray Mazuka and Greg Zeshuk alongside Trent Oster, his brother Brent, Zeshuk's cousin Marcel, and Augustine Yip. Of the founding team, Mazuka, Zeshuk, and Yip had recently graduated from medical school at the University of Alberta and had a background in programming for use in school. Together with Yip, they had created a medical simulation program. The three also played video games for recreation, eventually deciding to develop their own. Their success in the medical field provided them with the funding they needed to launch a video game company. To make their first game, they pooled their resources, which resulted in capital of $100,000. The company was incorporated on February 1st, 1995, though formally launched on May 22nd of 1995. Their first game, Shattered Steel, began its life as a proof-of-concept demo, similar to the Mech Warrior games. This demo was submitted to 10 publishers, 7 of whom returned to the company with an offer. A publishing deal for Shattered Steel was eventually signed with Interplay Entertainment. Brent Oster and Trent Oster left BioWare at that time to form Pyrotech Studios, which continued developing Shattered Steel but broke up a year later, with Trent returning to BioWare to finish the game. BioWare's first game was released the following year. Shattered Steel's release was described by IGN as a modest success, with decent sales. Two noteworthy points were the deformable terrain, player weapon damage caused craters in the environment, and zone damage, where well-aimed gunfire could shoot mounted weapons off enemies. A sequel to Shattered Steel was planned for 1998, but never realized.
BioWare's founders and staff were keenly interested in both computerized and pen and paper variants of role playing games. Their next development project, therefore, was determined to be a role playing game. When Interplay financed exploratory development, BioWare presented the publishers with a demo called Battleground Infinity. Interplay suggested that the demonstrated gameplay engine would be well suited to the Dungeons and Dragons license which it had acquired from Strategic Simulations. Accordingly, Infinity was reworked in line with the Dungeons and Dragons rule set. The result was Baldur's Gate, with a development cycle of 3 years. During this time, the three doctors continued to practice medicine. The demands of development later prompted Mizuka and Zeshuk to leave medicine and move into full-time development. Augustine Yip decided to continue with his medical practice. Baldur's Gate sold more than 2 million copies after its release, nearly matching the sales of Diablo. Following the success of Baldur's Gate, the Infinity engine was used for the game's Planescape Torment and Icewind Dale series. The success of Baldur's Gate was followed by an expansion pack for the game, Tales of the Sword Coast.
So we've definitely talked a lot about big BioWare titles, but let's talk a little bit about the development of Baldur's Gate and how we got to where we are today. Baldur's Gate began development in 1995 by Canadian game developer BioWare. The game was initially titled Forgotten Realms. According to Mizuka, their head programmer read all Forgotten Realms books, including the short stories and the paperbacks, to immerse himself into that setting. The game required 90 man-years of development, which was spent simultaneously creating the game's content and the BioWare Infinity engine. The primary script engine for the game, used mainly as a debugging tool, was Lua. Direct Draw was used for the graphics. Wasteland was a major influence on Baldur's Gate, particularly its design philosophy of having more than one possible method to achieve each goal. Usually for the time, the graphics were not built from tiles. Each background was individually rendered, which greatly extended the amount of time needed to create the game. At the time that the game was shipped, none of the 60-member team had previously participated in the release of a video game. The time pressure to complete the game led to the use of simple areas and game design. Ray Mizuka said that the team held a passion and a love of the art, and they developed a collaborative design spirit. He believes that the game was successful because of the collaboration with Interplay. According to writer Luke Christiansen, the character of Imoen was a late addition to fill a non-psychotic thief gap in the early levels. Christiansen assembled Imoen's lines by editing voiceover for a guard character named Peak from an unused demo, and explained that her lack of voice dialogue or standalone interactions with other party members throughout the game was due to budgetary constraints. The wife of Dean Anderson, a team member, was the basis for Imoen's facial features as depicted in her character portrait. Baldur's Gate was released on December 21, 1998, and was published by Black Isle Studios, an internal division of Interplay.
Now, if you've played Baldur's Gate 3, you have a vague idea on kind of the control schemes that we had. It was a little bit more bogged down back then than it is now, and we'll go over the gameplay aspect of it. So players conduct the game from a top-down isometric third-person perspective, creating a character who travels across pre-rendered locations, taking on quests, recruiting companions to aid them, and combating enemies, while working towards completing the game's main story. A user interface allows a player to move characters and give them actions to undertake, review information on ongoing quests and the statistics of each character in their party, manage their inventories, and organize the formation of the party, though the screen does not need to be centered on the characters being controlled and can be moved around with the mouse and keyboard. The latter capable of accessing various player options through keyboard shortcuts. All of the gameplay mechanics were coded to conform to the advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd Edition role-playing rules, with the game automatically computing rule intricacies, including tracking statistics and dice rolling. Although the game is conducted in real time, some elements of the rule set were modified to allow it to feature a pausable real-time mode. This allowed players to pause at any time and prepare what actions a character would do, including the ability to set the game to automatically pause at preset points in combat. For each new playthrough, the player can either create a new character or import one that they exported from a previous playthrough. A new character requires the player to determine what their name, gender, race, class, and alignment are, and what ability scores and weapon proficiencies they have. New characters can be multi class, but must adhere to the restrictions that come from this in accordance to the second edition rules. For example, a character who is both a cleric and a fighter may only use weapons of the former class.
The game's main story is divided up into 8 parts, featuring a prologue and 7 chapters. Each section requires the player to complete a specific task in order to continue. Some areas of the map are not accessible until the player has advanced to a specific chapter. A player may have up to 5 companions traveling with them in their party, with the player free to decide whom to recruit or dismiss from the party. The main UI consists of 3 action bars surrounding the main screen. The first bar consists of a map, journal, character records, their inventories, spellbooks, and a clock. The second bar consists of a portrait of each character in the party, their HP, order, and any effects they are experiencing. The third bar provides specific actions per the number of characters being controlled. If a single character is selected, the player has the ability to switch between the weapons the character is wielding, use spells or items, or utilize a character's or piece of equipment's special abilities. If more than one character is selected, the bar displays options for conversing with or attacking non-player characters, stop what is being done, or change their formation.
The inventory system allows each character to equip items categorized as weapons, ammunition, armor, helmets, necklaces, rings, belts, cloaks, feet, or usable. The number of items a character can both equip and carry is affected by their weight limit, which is determined by their strength ability score. Going over this limit will encumber the character, causing them to move slowly or prevent them from moving altogether until they remove items from their inventory. The system also indicates what equipment a character may not use, as defined by their class. This mechanic also determines how many weapon slots they have available. By default, all characters have 2 weapon slots, with an offhand slot for shields. Some classes allow characters additional weapon slots. Characters may equip 3 stacks of ammo for ranged weapons, bows, crossbows, and slings, and use 3 different types of usable items: potions, scrolls, and wands. Conversation can be initiated by players selecting a member of the party and clicking on a friendly or neutral NPC. Some conversations are initiated automatically when characters come close to them. Certain NPCs offer services the player can utilize, including buying and selling items and identifying enchanted items. Other useful places include inns, where the party can rest in safety to recover lost hit points and memorize spells, as well as temples, where characters can pay for healing services, such as resurrecting a dead party member.
Other features that affect gameplay include the ability to customize their character after creation, albeit with some restrictions, the ability to change the primary and minor colors used by each character, the ability to switch the game's AI on or off, and change what script a character uses. Most locations are hidden when first visited, but are revealed as the character moves around them. A fog of war effect hides explored areas when the player's characters move away from them. A reputation system that tracks the moral actions of the PC and affects how they are perceived, changing if they resolve a problem or commit a crime in the view of witnesses. Higher reputations cause shops to decrease prices, while lower reputations cause shops to increase prices. Lower reputations may also lead to the character being attacked when in town. Companions are also affected by reputation, with evil companions leaving the party, even attacking it if it is high, and good and neutral companions leaving when it is low. Some side quests also require a minimum reputation to begin. Certain NPCs may also react negatively or positively depending on their alignment and the player's reputation. The ability to keep track of in-game time through the changes in lighting and the activity that is occurring is also another feature. Characters become fatigued after spending a full in-game day, especially after traveling long distances between world map locations, and must rest to recover, either in an inn or camping out in the countryside within a dungeon. Characters can be ambushed when camping out or traveling long distances between world map locations. And finally, players can play either in single player mode or in multiplayer mode. The latter allows up to 6 players to work together online with their own created characters.
Now, when it comes to the specific setting of Baldur's Gate, it takes place in the world of Ed Greenwood's Forgotten Realms setting. During the year of 1368 DR, in the midst of an iron shortage, where items made with iron inexplicably rot and break. Focusing upon the western shoreline of Faerun, the game is set within a stretch of the region known as the Sword Coast, which contains a multitude of ecologies and terrains, including mountains, forests, plains, cities, and ruins. With the story encompassing both the city of Baldur's Gate, the largest and most affluent city in the region, and the land south of it, including the Cloud Peaks, the Wood of Sharpteeth, the Cloakwood Forest, the town of Burgost, and the village of Nashkel, and the fortress citadel of Candle Keep. In addition to the region, a variety of organizations from the Forgotten Realms setting feature as part of the game's main story, including the Zhentarim, the Red Wizards of Thay, the Iron Throne, the Flaming Fist, the Chill, the Black Talons, and the Harpers. Now, as far as characters go, Baldur's Gate includes around 25 player companions that can join with the player character. A number of the characters who appear include several who are canon to the official Forgotten Realms campaign setting, including Drizzt and Elminster.
So now let's move over and talk about the setup for the story. The player character is the young and orphaned ward of the mage Gorion. The two live in the ancient library fortress of Candlekeep. The ward is instructed by Gorion to prepare to leave the citadel during the night with no explanation. That night, a mysterious armored figure and his cohorts ambush the pair and order Gorion to hand over the ward. Gorion refuses and dies in the ensuing battle, while urging his ward to escape. The next morning, the ward encounters Imoen, a childhood friend and fellow orphan from Candlekeep, who had followed them in secret. With Candlekeep no longer accessible to them without Gorion's influence to circumvent its admission fee, and the city of Baldur's Gate closed off to outsiders due to bandit raids, the ward resolves to investigate the cause of the region's iron crisis. Traveling to the mines of Nashkel, the main source of the region's iron, the ward's party discovers that the mine's ore is being contaminated by a group of kobolds led by a half-orc, and that they and the bandits plaguing the region are being controlled by an organization known as the Iron Throne, a merchant outfit operating of Baldur's Gate. After sabotaging a mine operated by the Iron Throne in the Cloakwood that would presumably give them total control over the region's iron, the ward's party travels to the newly reopened Baldur's Gate. Invading the throne's headquarters, the group learns that proof of the organization's involvement with the Iron Crisis was taken by one of the regional leaders when they and the rest of the leadership were headed to Candlekeep for an important meeting. Revealing their findings to Duke Elton, the leader of the Flaming Fist, the group receive a rare and valuable book, which would allow them access into Candlekeep in order to spy on the meeting.
During their investigations in the Citadel's library, the ward discovers a prophecy written by the ancient seer Aluundo, foretelling how the offspring created during the time of troubles by the dead god Baal, the lord of murder, will sow chaos until only one remains to become the new lord of murder. The ward finds a letter from Gorion revealing that the ward is among the offspring of Baal, known as Baal Spawn. During their stay at Candlekeep, the ward's party is imprisoned for the murders of the Iron Throne leaders, regardless of whether or not they did so, until they can be transported to Baldur's Gate to be executed. Tetheril, a prominent keeper in Candlekeep, visits the party and reveals that a suspicious character the party met earlier, Kovaras, is really the foster son of one of the now dead Iron Throne leaders. His name is Savaruk, and is the one responsible for Gorion's murder and wishes to kill the ward as well. Believing the ward to be innocent, Tetheril transports the party into the catacombs beneath the fortress, where the party battle their way through doppelgangers, taking on the forms of people the ward knew in Candlekeep. Returning to Baldur's Gate, the ward's party find themselves accused of causing the Iron Crisis on the orders of the Kingdom of Amn, assassinating one of the city's Grand Dukes and poisoning Duke Elton. Forced to stay hidden from the Flaming Fist, the party discovers that the Iron Throne orchestrated the Iron Crisis to gain control of iron through their mine in the Cloak Wood, while using doppelgangers to weaken other merchant outfits, ensuring that they would have a monopoly on iron. With tensions rising between Baldur's Gate and Amn, the organization hoped to sell the stockpiled iron to the city at exorbitant prices. Afterwards, they aimed to de-escalate tensions between Baldur's Gate and Amn.
The party discovers that Sarevok, having discovered that he was a ball spawn, hoped to fuel distrust between Baldur's Gate and Amn by making each think the other was responsible for creating the crisis, and cause them to go to war. Sarevok believed that the resulting carnage would be enough to allow him to become the new Lord of Murder. Due to the ward's similar background, he hired assassins to kill them. Sarevok remained loyal to his father until the Iron Throne's meeting in Candlekeep threatened his plans, which led Sarevok to eliminate him and the other regional leaders of the Iron Throne before taking over the outfit and transferring their stores of iron to the city in order to be seen as a savior. He was also responsible for the poisoning of Duke Elton and the assassination of one of the 4 Grand Dukes. The Ward's party gained entry to the Ducal Palace, where the coronation of Sarevok as the Grand Duke of Baldur's Gate would be held, and present evidence of his schemes. Exposed, Sarevok flees into an ancient underground ruin beneath Baldur's Gate, with the Ward and the party chasing after him. The Ward confronts Sarevok within an ancient temple to Baal and defeats him, saving the Sword Coast and ending their brother's schemes. In the final ending cinematic, Sarevok's tainted soul departs his body and travels deep underground to a large circular chamber of alcoves, and destroys a statue of himself contained in one of the alcoves, whereupon it is revealed that the other alcoves each contain a statue of a ball spawn that exists in Faerun.
As far as interplay thought, Baldur's Gate had a very low chance of being a commercial success. They note that the publisher's headquarters in Britain predicted 0 sales in that region. Lifetime projections for the German market were no more than 50,000 copies, as reported by Udo Hoffmann of PC Player. Internally, BioWare's worldwide sale goal was 200,000 units, a number that PC Zone's Dave Woods said would justify work on the sequel. However, the game became an unexpected commercial hit. Ray Mazuka attributed the success in part to the Dungeons & Dragons license and to the team's decision to use fan feedback during development, which he felt had increased the game's mass market appeal. Following its shipment to retailers on December 21st, Baldur's Gate began to sell at a phenomenal rate, according to Mark Asher of CNET Game Center. He wrote at the time that its first run of 50,000 copies sold out immediately, and Interplay's elves are working hard to get more games to the stores. The title debuted in the United States at number 3 on PC Data's computer games sales rankings for the week ending on January 2nd, 1999. It sold through 55,071 copies in the country by the end of 1998 for revenue of $2.56 million. In its second week, Baldur's Gate rose to number 2 in the US. Internationally, it debuted at number 1 on Media Control's computer game charts for the German market in the first half of January 1999 and reached first place on ChartTrack's equivalent for the UK. According to Interplay, Baldur's Gate also took number 1 on the charts in Canada and France. Its global sales reached 175,000 units by mid-January of 1999, a sales rate that the Los Angeles Times reported as Interplay's fastest ever. This performance led to a stock price increase for the company.
In the United States, Baldur's Gate remained in PC Data's weekly top 3 from January 10th through February 6th. It claimed number 1 for January with sales of 80,500 copies and revenues of $3.6 million in the country that month. Supply shortages continued throughout much of January. The game likewise secured Media Control's number 1 position for the entirety of that month, and held at number 1 for the United Kingdom in its third week. Baldur's Gate subsequently took number 4 for February in the German market and number 3 in the United States, after holding in the latter country's weekly top 10 from February 7th through March 6th. By mid-February, Game Center reported sales of 450,000 units for Baldur's Gate, which Asher called the biggest hit Interplay has had since Descent, and a rebuttal to the common belief that role-playing games were commercially moribund. Worldwide sales totaled more than 500,000 copies by the end of that month. Despite these figures, Interplay posted a loss of $16 million for the fourth quarter of 1998 and of $28 million for the year. Brian Fargo attributed the losses in part to Baldur's Gate. He wrote that it did not ship until the last days of 1998, which reduced shipments in the quarter to about half the projected volume. Interplay reported worldwide sales of nearly 700,000 copies for Baldur's Gate by June, and it was the United States' second best-selling computer game during the first half of '99, behind SimCity 3000. As of September, it had sold above 300,000 units and earned roughly $15 million in revenues in the country during 1999 alone. A writer for PC Accelerator remarked that this success created an almost audible sigh of relief from publisher Interplay. By November, Baldur's Gate had sold roughly 1 million units worldwide. It claimed ninth place for 1999 in the United States, with a total of 356,448 sales that year. At $15.7 million in revenue, it was the country's seventh highest grossing computer game. Sales of Baldur's Gate continued in 2000. By March, it had surpassed 500,000 copies sold in the US, which led Deathlock of GameSpot to describe the title as an undisputed commercial blockbuster. US sales had risen to 600,000 units by April of 2001, while global sales totaled 1.5 million copies. The game proceeded to sell 83,208 units in the US from February of '01 through the first week of November. Worldwide, Baldur's Gate ultimately surpassed 2.2 million sales by early 2003, and by 2015, the game sold about 2.8 million copies.
Now, Baldur's Gate received positive reviews from virtually every major computer gaming publication that reviewed it. At the time of the game's release, PC Gamer US said that Baldur's Gate reigns supreme over every RPG currently available and sets new standards for those to come. Computer Shopper called it clearly the best advanced D&D game ever to grace a PC screen. Maximum PC Magazine compared the game to Diablo, but noted its more extensive selection of features and options. The pixel-based characters were panned, but the reviewers stated that the gloriously rendered backgrounds make up for that shortcoming. The main criticism was of the problems with the path-finding algorithm for non-player characters. Despite this, the game was deemed an instant classic because of the amount of customization allowed, the fluid storylines, and the replayability. The reviewer from Pyramid felt that the basic buzz was positive, surrounding the development of the game. The actual results are a mixed bag, but there's real promise for the future thanks to the inclusion of the Infinity engine. Baldur's Gate was awarded PC Role-Playing Game of the Year by the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences during the second annual Interactive Achievement Awards. The game also won Computer Role-Playing Game Awards by the Academy of Adventure Gaming Arts and Design, Computer Gaming World, the Game Developers Conference, Computer Gaming Strategy Plus, IGN, CNET Game Center, the Electric Playground, RPG Vault, and many, many more. The editors of computer games wrote that Baldur's Gate delivers everything you could ask for in a computer game. Baldur's Gate was number 3 on CBR's 2020 10 of the best D&D stories to start off with list. The article states that beyond giving you some insight on the Sword Coast, the game also provides a diverse cast of characters that your character can recruit into their party. This cast of characters serve as a great source of inspiration to make interesting player characters.
And of course, as we know, Baldur's Gate is still around today, and according to IGN, the original Baldur's Gate did much to revive the role-playing video game genre. John Harris of Gamasutra wrote that it rescued computer D&D from the wastebasket. GameSpy said that Baldur's Gate was a triumph that single-handedly revived the computer role-playing game and almost made gamers forgive Interplay for Descent to Undermountain. IGN ranked Baldur's Gate number 5 on their list of the top 11 Dungeons & Dragons games of all time in 2014. Phil Savage of PC Gamer praised BioWare's level design for the titular city in Baldur's Gate, stating that Baldur's Gate feels vast, exciting, and dangerous, just like a proper city. Baldur's Gate was the first game in the Baldur's Gate series. It was followed by the expansion pack Tales of the Sword Coast in '99, then the sequel Baldur's Gate 2 Shadows of Amn in 2000, and its expansion pack Throne of Baal in 2001. As of 2006, total sales for all releases in the series were at almost 5 million copies. The series set the standard for other games using AD&D rules, especially those developed by BioWare and Black Isle Studios, such as Planescape Torment, Icewind Dale, and Icewind Dale 2. The novel Baldur's Gate by Philip Athens was based on the game and released in 1999. Baldur's Gate was re-released along with its expansion in 2000 as Baldur's Gate Double Pack, and again in 2002 as a 3-CD collection entitled Baldur's Gate The Original Saga. In 2002, the game and its expansion were released along with Icewind Dale Heart of Winter, and Planescape Torment as the Black Isle compilation. In 2004, it was re-released, this time along the Icewind Dale 2 in Part 2 of the compilation. Atari published the Baldur's Gate 4-in-1 box set, including all 4 games, on a combination of DVDs and CDs.
Baldur's Gate and its expansion were released digitally on Good Old Games, or as we know it now, GOG.com, on September 23, 2010. It has also been made available via GameStop app as part of the D&D anthology, the Master Collection, which also includes the expansion Baldur's Gate Tales of the Sword Coast, Baldur's Gate 2 Shadows of Amn, Throne of Baal, Icewind Dale Heart of Winter, Icewind Dale Trials of the Lure Master, Icewind Dale 2 Planescape Torment, and the Temple of Elemental Evil. A remake of the original game, entitled Baldur's Gate Enhanced Edition, was released in 2012, developed by Overhaul Games. The game was released for Microsoft Windows, iOS, Mac OS X, Android, and Linux. And then Skybound Games, a division of Skybound Entertainment, brought Baldur's Gate Enhanced Edition to the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and Nintendo Switch in 2019. And as we come to a wrap with this, as we mentioned at the top of the episode, how impactful Baldur's Gate 3 is now in our current gaming society. It is not hard to see the similarities we're seeing in the gamer reviewers that we have for the OG Baldur's Gate as we do for the third one, and basically shaping how these RPGs, not even just specifically like tabletop RPGs brought to the computer, but how RPGs in general are created and setting the precedent back in 98 and then again in 2023, mirroring a lot of the sentiment that these reviewers had.
Yeah, it's an interesting challenge to take on, I think, because in a D&D campaign, you can do just about anything, right? You are the one making the story up as you go along. But in a video game, there are only so many things that the developers can do. And so to create a world where you feel like you really do have that autonomy is very difficult, I think. But they are not intimidated by that at all. Just go out and do the absolute best that they can and try to create the best experience that they can. And that's what leads to those great reviews, that, revival of the RPG genre. And it's crazy to think about, to me, that there was a time where RPG games really were not considered some of the best, because I think that is such a common theme within video games now, even if it's not a true RPG, that you're still desiring some RPG elements within whatever game you're playing, and a lot of them do have those elements. So they set the bar early and high, and then, Baldur's Gate 3, as we know, set a new standard just last year.
And it's great to see these different iterations of games come about to such a beloved system. Just like video games, D&D has had its up and downs with, its glorious heyday in the 80s into coming into more of the video games and stuff into the 90s, into a lull once the 4th edition of D&D came out at its lowest point. And with companies like Critical Role, with shows like Stranger Things, bringing a lot more of this game into the mainstream and showing, hey, it's not just that kind of like nerd in the basement playing it. It's a whole thing of like fantasy that's building about. It was so cool to see Baldur's Gate 3 coming after so many years since 1, 2, and all their multiple expansions had come out, to see this revitalization around the branding. And I think a huge, huge portion of that was Baldur's Gate. In the OGs that a lot of us played growing up and remembering, a D&D in a second edition setting for it, into using more of the 5th edition-ishness that Baldur's Gate 3 brings us. It's really cool to see generations be able to play the best of the best RPG of their time.
Absolutely. And to consistently hit that mark, very difficult. And I'm curious now, because I think that a game like Elder Scrolls is not really like an RPG in this sense, but it's pretty freeform compared to a lot of other video games, and that's one of its biggest draws. Now that we've sort of seen, I think, Baldur's Gate 3 come out, and people have those lofty expectations for not only a really expansive game, but a really tight running game. I'm curious to see what the reaction is to the 6th Elder Scrolls, should it ever be released.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think this is taking the idea of those RPGs, eliminating the dice rolls, so kind of getting rid of a lot of that luck, but putting on your character to level up. BioWare does still continue that on of the dice rolling and mechanics for their first few into Mass Effect and into Dragon Age. We see some of that similarities brought in there, but into a modern system to it. But when you're talking about the Elder Scrolls, a very beloved series from the originals, from Arena, into Morrowind, into Oblivion, then into finally Skyrim, which has been released 1,700 times. It is
Skyrim, do you say? I'm unfamiliar.
Oh, it's new. It's new. It's coming out for the latest and greatest, of course.
Okay,
but no,
it's the Nintendo Switch 2.
Of course, we'll eventually get there, and we'll get Skyrim again before we get 6.
The Switch U,
the SWU,
the SWU,
SWU. When we get on the SWU is when we know we've made it. But yeah, it's one of those things, because then we also see Fallout taking the idea more into the sci-fi realm of it. But when we're talking about more of what Bethesda has done in the realms of Fallout and the realms of Oblivion and Skyrim and everything else in the Elder Scrolls, we get Starfield, which unfortunately I think for a lot of people was kind of a letdown into the realm of them jumping into a new IP and hoping that when we do get Elder Scrolls 6, it is the hype that builds up above Skyrim. It is a true successor to it, and it does continue that RPG kind of first-person / third-person exploratory RPG that we do get to enjoy something like that, because Baldur's Gate 3, you're right, in terms of just the overall sense of an RPG, the freedom of it, the creativity of it, the silliness of it, the sadness of it, they really built it in there excellently, and it has set the bar.
Yeah. And I'm not a D&D player. Pretty much the only time that I've ever played it has been with you. So I'm curious, for your perspective as a D&D player, I mean, do you feel like games like Baldur's Gate really fill a void, or it's just another way to sort of dive into that thing that already interests you and just get more of it?
I think it's a bit of both. I'm newer. I'm on the new bandwagon of D&D through COVID. And so I never really played. I dabbled in it when I was younger, but never got into it until kind of COVID times and trying to find ways to connect with more people. And so it is really cool to see the stuff that I've read and the few campaigns I've played in one-shots to get that same feel in Baldur's Gate. You can be that murder hobo that's just like, we're just going to kill everybody. It doesn't matter. I'm just going to stab them. That's what I want to do. Into being like, hey, we're going to be silly characters. We're all barbarians, and all we're going to do is pick up our enemies and throw them. So it allows for all this creativity in a railroaded way that like a DM would set up for you. Like they have an overall story they want to tell. You're going to go through it, but you may venture into side quests. You may venture into these other things. And for me, it filled that void. The story was amazing. The characters were very fleshed out and had personalities that meshed well, but also butted against each other. And it was just a cool, overall fun story. And so I think it's a really cool starting place if you wanted to jump into like tabletop RPGs or had an idea of like, oh, I've obviously heard of, D&D at this point. Let me try and dabble in this game. I think it's a really cool idea to get started in it, to get the idea of how a character levels up, how do spells work, how do these attacks work, and just to have some fun with it. And then also to get the lore. What type of characters are there? What races, what classes, what monsters? It's really cool to like have so many things built in with a lot of really amazing Easter eggs for old fans.
And I have to imagine that having games like Baldur's Gate is nice, especially as you get older and it becomes a little bit more difficult to do that true full setup of we are
Mhm.
going to set this night and this is going to be our D&D night and oh well, I can't make it this night, whereas you could just sort of go and play some Baldur's Gate. Now Baldur's Gate doesn't come around too frequently. Like the first one we said came out in the mid 90s, and then this latest one came out in the early 20s still.
Yeah,
So,
so in 2023, so yeah, I mean, you had a huge span in between that, and they tried, with third edition and fourth edition, they tried to really make those other games around it, and people just kind of lost interest in it. The idea of like this just wasn't appealing. So yeah, you're right, and like having such a large gap into a lot of these things, and so with Larian, seeing the games they did previously, like within Divinity and Divinity Original Sin 2, bringing those in, everyone kind of knew that they had that old school Baldur's Gate feel to the RPG down, and being able to use the official D&D license in it was such a fun leap. So if you guys have played Baldur's Gate 3 and really enjoyed it, I recommend to go check out the Divinity series. Very, very similar. A lot of their own spin on it thrown in there, which is great. And there's plenty, plenty, plenty of mods. So if you really wanted to add your certain spells or characters, then you can. But it is really cool to see people geek out and nerd out about these fun things that they really enjoy. And you're right. There's plenty of times you can't make a D&D night or try and like have friends move across the country or, other things come up with work or kids. But Baldur's Gate 3 will also allow you to jump in and out of your friends' games. So you can play a campaign together and be able to like level up your characters together and have fun with that. So it is really cool to have that as a aspect of community as well.
yeah, and the appeal to games like Baldur's Gate to me is obviously that ease of socialization, that social aspect, but just also, it brings me back a little bit more to the style of game that I grew up on, which was more of a community type of experience where it was about going
Mhm.
over to someone's house and sitting on the couch and all playing video games together or taking turns playing video games together. It wasn't the new modern style of game where you are playing a lot of games with people, but you're doing it alone as well. You're just talking over the internet. And while it is the same, it's also different. It's a better setup for, I think, performance, but just
Mhm.
doesn't really have the same vibe of like a game night at a friend's house. Whereas I think
Yeah.
that that camaraderie that comes with an open-ended game like Baldur's Gate, I think is really cool, and I'd love to see more of them. And I do hope that Baldur's Gate 3, that other companies do consider it a new standard. But I know that a lot of the immediate feedback was, "You're crazy if you think that we're going to be able to do this." So I don't have my hopes
Yeah.
set up high.
Yeah. So we'll see. But yeah, I mean, I think as we kind of wrap up Baldur's Gate, just in general, I think it's so cool to have these type of games, even if you're not into them, even if you're terrible at them and you find them, stressful or boring over the top. It's so cool to see success all over the gaming industry in these areas. And I hope for just all over the place, we see more and more of this smaller studios that are delivering a full product with a beautiful experience that is not just trying to be a cash cow,
For sure. And
is the hope of it.
yeah, and picking this game as a game that sort of revitalized that RPG genre, I think is really important for the time because as we discussed, just the influence that RPG elements have had on especially like other fantasy games and that entire genre, but then games totally outside of that fantasy element as well. People have taken a lot of ideas from the open-endedness of role playing and included it in their own games in their own ways. And that influence is undeniable. A really cool game. Glad that they still do it. And excited to see what other games are influenced in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we wrap this up, Derek, let the people know we've told them why we picked it, but what would you give it as a rating?
It's a 10. It's an easy 10, I think. It's unique, it's different, it's something that it didn't have any expectations to be successful, and yet it was. Whereas I think that we have a lot of games now that have a lot of expectations that then fall and fail those expectations. And so it's a little bit of a remnant of a different time, which is always fascinating and always cool to talk about with you, just sort of looking at those things retrospectively. But yeah, I mean, I think that it is, for what it was trying to be, really a perfect game.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there. I mean, usually give a silly score with this, but truly, it's such a fantastic game that's led to a series of missteps over the years. But with the revitalization of Larian into Baldur's Gate 3 has kind of solidified that arc. Yeah, I mean, I would give it 10 hugs out of 10 because it's a great game.
10 ball spawns
out of ball.
Out of ball.
Beautiful.
Research for this episode was done by Alex Kendall and Derek Baker. The intro and outro music was given to us by our friend Evan Barr, and our lovely artwork was provided by Aaron Shattuck.
Beautiful people, as well as the beautiful people on our Patreon. You can check us out at patreon.com/finishthefight, where we have a bunch of physical and digital rewards for ya. I want to thank a few select members today with Snide T-Bird, Nick Hyman, and Anthony Gooch. Thank you so much for your support.
You can find this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or most likely your favorite podcast listening platform. If you haven't yet, please drop us a review. It helps us out a lot, and we'd love to hear from you. And if you are a Spotify listener, there are Q&As at the bottom of every episode. Go ahead and participate in those. We're asking questions, usually talking the game. Just give us an answer, and maybe your response will be published.
Absolutely. You can also check us out on Twitch. You can see me at twitch.tv/sourman70. That is twitch.tv/SOURMAN70. As well as Derek over at twitch.tv/thebakerman247. That is twitch.tv/thebakerman247.
You can follow this podcast on Instagram or Twitter. We are also in Discord. It's free to join. There is a link in the description of every episode. We're in there. It's pretty open-ended, and we would love to see you.
And with that, that has been our coverage of Baldur's Gate. Are there any other RPGs or mainline story games like this that you think you should cover? Are there any ones that deserve much more presence in the modern day? Let us know. And with that, I have been your host, Alex Kendall.
And I am your host, Derek Ballspawn.
And this has been Finish the Fight, a gaming podcast.